You know, this is a lot easier when Ricky Blues is here. Boy, I think we need our producer back. Oh, there. I think it's working. Red light. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I certainly gave it my best try. This is a lot easier when Ricky Blues is here as the pilot and I'm the co-pilot. But I think I've got this kind of figured out. After all these years, I've picked up a couple things here and there. Maybe I'm not the brightest, but I'm sure not the dullest knife in the drawer either. So, let's take a look at this.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Hello, wrestling fans. Tim Walker here at the Pin offices. And as you can see, I'm here all by myself. No Ricky Blues. If you're surprised, I'm just as surprised as you are. Because I depend on Ricky Blues a lot. You don't know how much. But I'm going to do my darn best to pilot this plane tonight. And we are flying high above Charm City, Baltimore, Maryland. Right outside of Baltimore is a little town called Dundalk, Maryland. 25 years ago tonight was a defining moment in the history of Maryland wrestling. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. And Ricky Blues, although he's not here beside me tonight, he's on location outside of Baltimore in Dundalk, Maryland. And he has some very, very special guests tonight. Ricky, are you there? Hang on. Ricky, I can see you through the static here a little bit. Can you hear me? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have Ricky Blues. This is working better than what I thought it would. All right. Ricky, I'm going to send it to you.
What's that, Tim?
Live.
Yeah,
Dundalk, Maryland.
Nope, we're here. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Welcome, friends and fans. I just want to do a quick little introduction. We're out here in the field. I'm your road correspondent for today. Today we're with Ed Zahn, Julie Blanton, Jeff Capo. We're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the very first Wrestling Independent Network card. I've brought together what we've commonly referred to over the years as the Brain Trust. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about what their responsibilities were as they developed and built what I like to refer to as the model promotion in that early 1990s era.
Wow.
Ed, if you don't mind.
I guess the name I used was the National Event Coordinator, and I just brought a bunch of good people together. That's
So
what it really came down to, was finding the right people to do the right thing and believed in the same things I did.
The head of the table.
And yeah, because none of it was possible without them. I could not have done all this stuff laying here. Could never done it by myself. So National Event Coordinator was the name. Behind the scenes, I did everything they didn't do. It is. It's amazing, and it's being remembered by you, which I really, really appreciate it. Because many years I thought all this that we did would just basically fade away and nobody would know about it. And yet I realize now what we accomplished meant so much more than I ever realized in the last 25 years.
Well, you made what is probably the most important impact, in my opinion, and I know it's shared by a lot of the guys from our generation, because without what you did in those early days leading into Win, because Win was really the polishing of the brass, if I guess the way to coin it, we wouldn't have today what we have, and the people who are out there experiencing all the fame that they're experiencing on the indie scene locally here in the Mid-Atlantic wouldn't have had that foothold unless it was guys from your generation that turned around and dug in and entrenched it and built that hotbed.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Julie, a little bit about what you did, because if it wasn't for you, wow, oh wow, where would the coverage have come in the marketing aspect?
She's the one who put the butts in the seats.
Yeah.
Give her credit. She really did.
Well, I couldn't have done it without Jeff and Ed and all the boys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the talent. My job was media relations director, and I did all of the administrative work, press releases, news stories. My job was to promote the shows and promote the talent.
To get the talent, to get, like Ed said, the people in to see the talent. Now, you're selling yourself a little bit short, because the job you had, you were dealing with an outside entity. These guys dealt a lot more with the inside entity. So you had to really make your niche, because this is brand new, and we're forging new ground, and you're at the forefront of it, talking to all these other entities, television, newspapers, radio, and now selling a new product that they weren't even sure about. So it wasn't on stable grounds. And what you did was incredible at that time, and especially for the very first show, which we're going to talk about. That just showed the prowess that you had at what your job function was. And I tell you, Julie, you helped out so many different ways, and what we call in the business getting the boys over, because you absolutely did.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Jeff?
Yep, Jeff Capo. My position was left out. No. No, I did quite a few different things. I was kind of like the catch-all, the jack of all trades. I guess the biggest thing was I created the logo for the promotion, and we'll talk about that a little bit, how that came about. The origin of the name, or the origin of the promotion, was when Ed and I got out of UIW. Ed approached me and said, "Oh, I got this other promotion. Let's meet and talk about it." And we talked about it, and he said, "Well, I want to call it Independent Wrestling Network, IWN." And I said, "Oh, okay, sounds great. It's kind of different from everybody else." And then you came up and said the suggestion. You said, "Well, wait a minute. If we just switch to 2 letters, it comes in the Win." So there we go. That's the super secret origin of Wrestling Independent
Wrestling
Network.
Independent Network. We wanted it to be a win-win.
And it was that night that I went home, and I literally dreamed the logo in my head. I came back in, sketched it on paper. That was it. We didn't change it. We didn't modify it. It was simple. It was clean. Ed came up with the
More than a name.
more than a name and
An
attitude. So that basically, in one 24-hour period, the whole thing just came together. But composing the programs, getting the T-shirts made, did a lot of the merchandising, the shirts and hats you see here, the cool buttons that we had. We had stickers, which was Julie's favorite thing to have, was a sticker. Just doing a lot of that. I also, at the time, I was a member of the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. So I helped out at that aspect, which was very important, especially for the first show, by getting Cystic Fibrosis Foundation on board. And we also did with other charities, including Ronald McDonald House and a few of the others. So I parlayed that experience into helping out the promotion. Like you said, we were forging new ground, so being able to get into the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and Ronald McDonald House, which was also helped Julie out with getting some extra press, because you attach those names to an event, and you certainly get some play on that going forward.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's much easier to get some free press that way when you attach to a nonprofit.
And with the minimum, not that we had a minimal budget, but we had to work within our certain constraints. And
Well, we had budgets.
right, we had budgets, small
We had
budgets,
budgets.
but what you got out of those budgets really showed.
We had to
in that first-
maximize our
right,
budgets.
Right.
Yep. There wasn't so much stuff there was a lot of free publicity always available, but,
Yeah.
just to kind of put it in place, there was no AOL. There was no internet.
No
There was
Facebook,
no cell
no
phones.
tweeting.
Hell, part of your budget, sometimes the biggest part of your budget was your long distance phone call. It was more expensive than your talent. I mean, it was just a total different time.
Here's a throwback for you. The only thing that we had on the internet was Prodigy, and we actually did a little bit with that. But again, it was so early on in that type of thing. We didn't have it, so like
We weren't even up to
everything was-
Sport Pro Wrestling at that point.
right. It was all word of mouth basically at that point.
A lot of it was word of mouth, and two, developing the relationships with the media. So that way I knew I had a go-to person. I think one of my biggest coups that I was most proud of was getting John Buren in the ring to do that 6 o'clock sportscast the night of the first event.
I don't think anybody's ever done that again.
Well,
No.
I found out through the grapevine he was a honky tonk man fan, and that's how it happened.
There you go.
Because you use what's given to you and you
Exactly.
run with it.
And as we go on with the show, we're gonna really flesh that out, because it'll play into our second segment when we talk about the main event that was built there and how you were able to go from what was customary 300-400 people to 2,000 people, which has not been done again repeated in Maryland on an independent card. Other people have gotten close, but nobody's hit that 2,000 attendance mark that you guys did. And again, we're talking 1992. February 7th. That's a landmark day in professional wrestling history, independent history in the Mid-Atlantic.
Maryland has seen its share of wrestling companies come through the border through the years. But this was a real special night at Martin's North Point there on February 7th, 1992. Just a few years earlier, we had seen the debut of the UIW in Essex, Maryland at the club with about 350 in attendance. Earlier than that, we'd seen the MAWA debut in Odenton, Maryland at a small fire hall where it jam-packed 600 people into. Even the big debut of MCW after its well-publicized split with the MEWF debuted at 1,100 people. But this was even bigger than that. Like I said, the fans just kept coming in the building, and it really had that magical feel to it. And almost 2,000 people attended this card, really cementing Ed Zahn's reputation as a top-notch promoter throughout the area. And it proved to me, and it proved to everyone in the Maryland area, just what Ed and his team could accomplish. But you've heard enough from me for right now, so I'm going to send it back to our correspondents in the field. Ricky Blues, if you're out there, I'd like to get Ed, Jeff, and Julie's take on this inaugural card of the Wrestling Independent Network, and if they felt the magic like I felt the magic that night.
Wow, Tim, that's pretty interesting. The magic of that night. That's a nice way of putting it. Guys, we did have magic that night. You guys were the creator of the magic. I'll never forget, I was opening match. We'll talk about that in our next episode, or next portion of this, about how you set up that card that night, because it turned out a brilliant stroke. But the magic of that night was that those people kept coming. Julie, you mentioned earlier about that quick segment you did with somebody who else is going to be talking with us a little bit later, Agent Orange, and how that tied into Nikolai Volkov and the Honky Tonk Man that night, and that 6 o'clock segment and inviting the media in. Talk a little bit about that magic, just a little bit about how that's set up and what you really think that created for us in the future.
Well, John Buren was the sportscaster for Jay-Z, which I believe was the #1 news channel in Baltimore. I found out through a friend of a friend that he was a big Honky Tonk Man fan, so I had to call and call and call, and finally I got his intern or his person, and I said, look, we're having the Honky Tonk Man. I know he's a fan. We need the 6:30 broadcast in our wrestling ring at Steeltown. We have to have it. It's got to be done. And all the stars aligned and the planets, and he accepted. And I think by doing that, it did give us some legitimacy. And maybe folks at home that were seeing it, hey, I still have time to get out there. The Honky Tonk Man, yeah, let's go. We had a lot of press for that show.
Right.
I know that no internet, no Facebook. We had faxes.
Right.
And so I was constantly faxing releases, but I tell you, I was driving station to station to this newspaper, to that newspaper, constantly on the phone trying to get the decision maker or the publisher or the editor or somebody, hey, please, print this.
And it was hard holding up that 5-pound cell phone that you had back in
Yes,
the day.
yes.
I didn't even have a 5-pound cell phone back then. So, but I put a lot of miles on my Trans Am. So.
Hell, we didn't even have cell phones back then.
Yeah,
not really.
yeah.
I mean,
So
think about it.
it was a lot of work.
Legwork, yep.
It was well worth it. And once those relationships got established, the network came into play. And I just think that then people realized, hey, yeah, this is a local product. It's affordable for families. You can go out, see a good show for 2.5 hours. And, it brought them out.
You know, I didn't really think about it till now, and I think we did discuss it at the time, but the building gave us a lot of credibility too. The fact that we were in Martin's North Point, we weren't in a club, we weren't in a dungeon somewhere, we were in a premier social center of the time in being in Martin's North Point. And
Which to my
that,
knowledge, I don't think they
again,
had ever had a sporting event there at all.
They had not.
No
So
boxing or anything like that.
whoever got us in that building, whoever's idea, I honestly don't remember.
That's Jeff.
That was mine.
That
Because
was Jeff.
that was a family connection. My mom's cousin was the manager of Martin's North Point.
Well, there you go.
And so I went to him. I said, "Oh, my mom's, cousin. Oh, hey, great. Let's talk." And we talked about, doing an event. And like I said, they were hesitant at first. Again, they had never had any type of boxing or wrestling
Right.
or any of that type of thing there. They always had like Ed said, it was a social place. They had big dinners and things like that. They never had anything on that order before. And they were obviously a little hesitant because they were like, well, are these guys going to wreck the building or anything like that? But
Exactly.
obviously that never happened. Everything went really well with them.
So that and again, who we were doing it for and the support that they gave us. I mean, it was just a lot of things came together in the right place with the right people. And that night was kind of like, I've been preaching we can do this for I don't know how long, and somebody's finally given us the opportunity to do it. And my God, we jumped in on top of it and we proved it.
So what would if you could capsulize that in just a little couple sentences, Ed, what was the magic of that night for you?
Just the culmination of what I had been preaching for the 8 years that I think by that point I was probably 7 or 8 years into promoting. The culmination, just everything coming together that something like this can be done, that professional wrestling on the independent scene can be taken to this level, get this kind of response. And if the right people are behind it with the right ideas and the people who know business with the people who know wrestling, who know the wrestling business, get together and let that knowledge flow and keep the egos out of the way, you can accomplish something really special.
And you did. That night was there. There's no doubt you guys did. Jeff, the same question for you. What was, if you could, in just a small sentence, what was the magic of that night for
happened.
you? Yeah.
Never happened. I mean, just to see something that we created to actually, for a debut of an independent show, an independent wrestling show, especially at that time, as you've been talking about on Pin, we were just beginning.
Right.
And not only our beginning, but the beginning of independent wrestling. To see that many people at an independent show was just absolutely incredible.
It was. It absolutely was.
Thank you, Ricky Blues. Back here at the studio, it is just great to see some of my old friends, Ed Zahn, Jeff Capo, Julie Blanton. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person tonight, but it is certainly my pleasure to get to talk to you via satellite. This was one of the most important nights in the history of Maryland wrestling, and one of the most important things about it was the size of this crowd. Just take a look at it. What an interesting night it was. I remember being very cold February evening, and I remember the building being a little bit on the chilly side, and I was there a little bit early, and I remember making the comment to someone, boy, it's a little bit cold in here tonight. The response that I got back was prophetic. The person said to me, don't worry about it being cold in here tonight, because when all the people get here, it'll warm up quick. When those doors opened, it was like a flood into the building. And I thought to myself, wow, this is going to be pretty good tonight. We're going to have a nice crowd. And the people kept coming in, and they kept coming in, and they kept coming in. And I thought to myself, we're going to have more than just a nice little crowd tonight. This is going to be a huge crowd. And as the people kept coming into the building, then I thought to myself, where are all these people going to sit? So we went from one extreme to the other. From thinking about the crowd and worrying about what the attendance would be to wondering how are we going to fit all these people into the building tonight. It was just amazing to see. And it was a testament to the hard work that Ed and Jeff and Julie put into that night. All the great stars from the Mid-Atlantic area were assembled under one umbrella on that night on February 7th. And I know it took a lot to put this card together from top to bottom. A lot of credit has to go to Jeff Capo and Julie Blanton as well, who lined up a lot of the publicity, and especially Julie, who lined up a live remote which aired on the 6 o'clock news on Channel 13 right there in Baltimore. It was a very entertaining segment, and I could tell that it worked perfectly because right after that segment, you could tell the local people came crowding into the building.
What was the perspective of what you were trying to create then? Think about it, because you'd already had some pedigree in the business, and you developed. Jeff, you did as well. And Julie, not only did you have ties in Maryland, but you had ties in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, with David Lehigh's VWA.
And I have to thank David for giving me the opportunity to get a foothold into the business and to learn the administrative side.
Now, when you guys put all that together, and you come together as a brain trust, what is the perspective that what are you trying to make? What is the statement that you're trying to make with Win? And I know what it is because I lived through it with you. But in your words, Ed, first, what were you trying to do with Win?
Well, I just firmly believe that there was still a place in wrestling for a high quality, or there could be, let's say could be a place in wrestling for a high quality independent. There were other independents out there, some had TV, but I thought we could take it to a level of presentation and quality that nobody ever did before. I had access to talent because of being around the business, because of starting out by doing ring rentals. Mm-hmm. So I was at a lot of different shows, a lot of different promotions, got to see a lot of different talent. And I thought it was possible to put on a high quality show with high quality matches starting from the opener, the curtain jerker, right through to whatever the main event was. That I could entertain you with wrestling for 2.5 hours, send you home, and you'd be happy about it, and you'd want to come back to the next show. That we could put on a quality product that didn't embarrass you. Mm-hmm. That the guys could go out and do their work and could do their matches and didn't blow spots so bad that the audience was sitting there laughing at them. And I had the ability to draw from Richmond, from Philadelphia, from New York, from Pittsburgh, West Virginia, and that was what Win was all about. We wanted to put on a show and show people that you could do independent wrestling and put on a quality product that could rival anybody as far as the entertainment value of the promotion and the storylines, the quality of the ring, and then having the right support people behind it that understood what they were doing, because the biggest fall down in independent wrestling is they teach you how to wrestle in school, but damn it, they don't teach you the business of the business.
Right.
And
exactly.
I learned that business the hard way. We talked about a little bit about Grimes Gym in York, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I lost my ass there that week, but I learned a lot. And then to have the kind of caliber and people with me at that point, we were lucky. We were lucky that we all wound up in the same spot at the same time to do what we did that night.
And you brought Julie along. Julie, talk a little bit about how you've moved in being introduced into the business to actually being part of it and running a business aspect of it, especially dealing with sales in advertisement was something completely different. What did you first feel like when you got in? I mean, obviously you had a little bit of fanness stuck in your heart, but talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was a fan. My brother wrestled,
Right.
and that's kind of where it started.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I went to school for communications and business, and I was just trying to get experience in sales, marketing, public relations, and so that was really my intent.
The foundry stones for you.
Right.
You're building. Okay. When you first get introduced into Win, what was the feelings that you were going through?
Oh my. I was anxious. I was happy, enthusiastic, a little scared.
Young.
Right.
Young.
Well,
Yeah,
but still,
a little intimidated because not a lot of women, and a lot of people wouldn't take me seriously. However, as I began making my relationships with the media,
Mhm.
they started seeing the product and doing stories and coming out and doing interviews, and we started getting stuff on the radio and articles in the newspapers, and then it was like it gave it legitimacy,
Okay.
and so it all worked out, I guess.
And that very first night, as we're sitting there, February at Martin's, and the doors haven't opened yet.
Oh my God, I was
The
so
butterflies?
nervous. I was so nervous because I was running the door like when people were bringing, their tickets, and it was just like chaos. It was pandemonium.
Yes, it was.
But in a good way. And it was like they just kept coming. They kept coming. And I was like, oh yes, but I did.
This
it worked.
paid off.
It worked.
The
And so
hard work paid off.
It was awesome.
Now, Jeff, you had some other experiences as well. Later in your career, you got in front of the camera in the ring as referee and all that.
Right.
You started with Ed too, doing well. Actually, you showed up at ASWA, I think, toward the end of ASWA. Got him.
ASWA, and then of course Ed with AWF.
Right.
I first met Ed in '89, and then we started. I started doing some photography at some of his shows at the Buck Tractor Pull and things like that. And then this was all part through Joel Goodhart's Squared Circle fan club and everything, and worked with it obviously in UIW at that point. But this was really something different. We had talked a little bit about it before. I mean, UIW was such a large group of people, and I think that hurt it in the long run. I think there was too many people trying to do too many things.
Committee behind the scenes is what
Right.
you're talking about. Mhm.
Right. Whereas this was just us, and we all had our things to do and got it done. And I think we were all solely dedicated to the product. We wanted to get that brand out there, and it wasn't about us. It wasn't about who's in front of the camera, who's doing this. It was about let's get the shows going, let's get the people in. If the promotion does good, everybody does good. Whether it's us, you as a worker, everybody did it, and that's where I looked at it. And my role was obviously greatly expanded going from UIW into Win, and I have to obviously thank Ed and Julie for that, to giving me that opportunity to move forward and do those things that I did.
Wow, it has been a treat to get to talk with Ed Zahn, Jeff Capo, and Julie Blanton, who were really the minds behind the Wrestling Independent Network and the very first card at Martin's North Point in Dundalk, Maryland. And what a successful night that is. My hat's off to you. And all the fans that attended that night were definitely treated to one of the best independent cards in the Mid-Atlantic area at that time. I'd like to thank Ed, Jeff, Julie, and everyone there in Dundalk for participating tonight. It has been a real treat for me to get to interact with you here from the control center at the PIN offices. And I look forward to next week's episode where we'll discuss a little bit more about that February 7th, 1992 inaugural card of the Wrestling Independent Network.